Over breakfast, the toast was charred, and his voice was colder than the plate it rested on. One sentence, casually tossed between sips of coffee, cut deeper than any blade. He told her she was nothing but a placeholder, someone to fill the silence until something better came along. The words lingered, sharp and unforgiving, but she did not flinch. She let them sink into her bones, not as wounds, but as fuel. In that instant, something shifted. The illusion of love shattered, and what replaced it was not heartbreak, but resolve, quiet, unwavering, and merciless. She raised her eyes from the burnt edges of her breakfast, her gaze steady, unreadable. To him, it looked like acceptance, maybe resignation, and he mistook her silence for weakness. Inside, however, the storm had already begun. Every cruel word was etched into her memory, not to be mourned but to be used. She knew better than to rage, better than to let him see the fire he had ignited. The mask of silence became her armor, her stillness a shield, while he smirked, believing he had crushed her spirit. She was already writing the first lines of his downfall. Days turned into weeks, and with every passing moment, the cracks in their facade widened. He laughed too freely at his phone, lingered too long outside the house, and dismissed her with careless remarks that stung less each time, because she had stopped feeling them as wounds and started treating them as evidence. Each insult, each indifferent gesture, only sharpened her resolve. She studied him as though he were a puzzle unraveling before her, every careless word another piece that revealed the truth of the man he really was. Arrogant, careless, and unworthy of the trust she had once given him. It was the small details that betrayed him. Receipts tucked into his jacket pocket for dinners he never mentioned. Whispers caught in late-night phone calls he claimed were work. Excuses that no longer held weight when compared against his empty eyes and late returns. These unseen threads of deception wove a pattern too obvious to ignore, and yet she said nothing. She folded the receipts neatly, filed away the whispers in memory, and let the lies accumulate. He believed he was clever, untouchable. She let him. It only made the final act more certain. One evening, as the clock ticked in silence and the air felt heavier than usual, the truth crystallized. She no longer needed to wonder, no longer needed to question. The man she had trusted, the man she had built a life beside, had never truly seen her at all. She had been expendable from the start, someone to lean on until he found a shinier distraction. The clarity was bitter, but it was freeing. Betrayal no longer stung as much as it fueled her, and with clarity came precision. She would not waste her pain on tears. She would spend it on strategy. From that moment forward, she became an artist of pretending. Outwardly, she was the same wife, soft-spoken, attentive, devoted. Inwardly, she mapped every step of his collapse. She served his dinners, smiled at his lies, and kissed him goodnight, all the while laying the groundwork for the storm to come. Every kindness was a calculation. Every nod of agreement was a quiet rehearsal for the day she would strike. He believed her blind. She allowed him to bask in his illusion, never realizing it was she who held the script. From the shadows, she watched him spin more lies than he could keep track of. Each false word he uttered was another nail in his coffin. She collected them with care, not confronting, not questioning, but documenting. His arrogance grew alongside her silence, and she let him walk deeper into his own trap. Every evening she placed another piece of evidence in the hidden box she kept. Bank statements, photographs, messages. He believed he was fooling her, but he was only building the case for his own undoing. It was inevitable that he would slip. Arrogance has a way of erasing caution, and his mistake was as careless as it was irreversible. A message left open on his laptop, a name that didn't belong, a meeting he could no longer disguise. In that moment, she knew the time had come. His own hand had sealed his fate, and she had everything she needed. Calmly, methodically, she finalized her preparations. The stage was ready, and he was walking willingly into it, blind to the trap waiting for him at the dinner table. Dinner was set with care, the table glowing in soft candlelight, the air deceptively calm. He walked in, oblivious, certain he was in control, unaware that the ground beneath him was already crumbling. She poured his wine, served his meal, and let the silence stretch between them until he mistook it for peace. Then, with the same steady gaze she had given him over burnt toast, she began. What started over breakfast would end here, at this table, where masks were no longer needed. Her words were precise, sharp, but measured. With each revelation, she peeled away his lies, exposing him layer by layer. He laughed at first, then faltered, his smirk slipping into disbelief as she produced the evidence. Receipts, messages, whispers she had gathered, all laid bare before him. He tried to twist the story, to reclaim his power, but it was too late. The knife she turned wasn't literal, but it cut deeper than steel. She had stripped him of control, and for the first time, he was the one cornered. His world collapsed in slow motion, every secret dragging him further into ruin. The life he had built on lies disintegrated before his eyes, leaving him desperate, scrambling for excuses that no longer mattered. She did not need to raise her voice or shed a tear. Her silence and precision were more powerful than any outburst. He had underestimated her, and now he paid the price. The fall of a pretender was not loud. It was suffocating, inevitable, crushing him under the weight of his own deceit. When it was over, only ashes and silence remained. The man who had once declared her a placeholder now sat broken, powerless, stripped of everything he thought he controlled. She did not gloat, did not linger in his ruin. Instead, she rose from the wreckage, her freedom intact, her spirit unchained. He had sought to make her small, but in the end, it was she who had proved unshakable. She walked away without looking back, her final victory not in his destruction, but in the life she would build beyond him. No longer a placeholder, she was the author of her own beginning. The morning began with burnt toast and a remark that stripped away every illusion she had clung to. He didn't shout, didn't slam his fist against the table. He didn't need to. His words were enough. She had been nothing more than a convenience, a placeholder until something better came along. The cruelty was casual, almost bored, as though he were swatting away a fly. She set her coffee down with steady hands, her eyes fixed on the smoke curling from the charred bread. She said nothing, but inside a door locked shut. Love had died long before this moment, but now its corpse lay exposed, and in its place something sharper was born. He glanced at her silence, smirk tugging at his lips, and mistook it for surrender. That was always his mistake, confusing quiet with weakness. She had learned long ago that rage wasted energy, that tears gave him fuel. He thrived on reaction, fed on the proof that his barbs had landed. But this time, her calm unnerved him in ways he didn't yet understand. Behind her still gaze, something stirred, cold and patient. He thought he had silenced her, broken her spirit. In truth, he had underestimated the one thing he should have feared, her capacity to endure and to plan. To the world outside, their marriage gleamed with the polish of perfection. He was charming at dinner parties, generous with laughter, and endlessly attentive in public. Friends envied her for having such a devoted husband, but behind closed doors the charm evaporated. He sneered, mocked, dismissed, each word calculated to diminish her. She had become an expert at smiling through the cracks, perfecting the mask that concealed the rot beneath. He performed for the world. She performed for survival, and while others saw a golden union, she had come to recognize the truth. He was nothing but a parasite cloaked in respectability. His control was everywhere. Money, friendships, even the smallest freedoms bent under his authority. He rationed her life out like a miser, disguising domination as care. Every insult tightened the invisible chains. Every withheld kindness another reminder of her cage. He believed he was pulling strings, directing her every move, but the more he tugged, the more aware she became of each knot. And though he had built those chains to bind her, they also mapped the structure of his arrogance. What bound her also revealed where the links could break. It was the late nights that betrayed him first. The half-hidden texts, the smug smiles he thought she didn't notice, the excuses delivered with an indifference that bordered on contempt. He grew careless, his overconfidence a shadow that stretched longer by the day. Whispers in the dark, fragments of conversations cut short when she entered the room. Each detail stitched itself into a picture too vivid to ignore. She didn't confront him, not yet. She let him believe the shadows concealed him, while in truth they only sharpened her vision. Then came the morning when he went too far. Over breakfast, his arrogance slipped, words spilling out without thought. A cruel aside about how he deserved better, about how some people were meant only to support others and nothing more. It wasn't new, not really. He had chipped away at her for years. But this time, the pieces aligned. The betrayal she had suspected stood confirmed. Not through evidence alone, but in the disdain in his voice, the certainty that she would never rise against him. That morning, something inside her snapped, not in anger, but in clarity. Her mind replayed every red flag she had once forced herself to swallow. The ambitions he mocked until she abandoned them. The silences stretched so long they turned rooms into tombs. The betrayals she brushed aside because love had seemed worth more than pride. They surfaced now not as regrets but as lessons. She saw the architecture of his cruelty laid bare, a structure she had lived inside for too long. And with each memory, her resolve sharpened. What she had once endured would now become her arsenal. He grew bold in his arrogance, certain she remained blind. Lies slipped from his tongue without thought, each one sloppier than the last. And she, quiet and watchful, documented them all. A dinner bill signed with the wrong date, a perfume that didn't belong to her, a shift in tone when he answered calls in the other room. He believed himself untouchable, but she was watching with eyes that missed nothing. Every detail he overlooked became another thread in the net she wove in silence. Her ledger of wrongs was not written on paper, but burned into memory, though she kept her evidence tucked away like treasures. Receipts, messages, photographs, each humiliation catalogued, each slight preserved. He thought his cruelty evaporated once spoken, forgotten as quickly as it was delivered. But she remembered. She remembered everything. And in remembering, she built the case against him, a quiet record that would one day become his undoing. She did not scream. She did not fight. Instead, she honed her silence into something sharper than words. Every unspoken thought was a blade, every withheld reaction another edge polished. He mistook her calm for apathy, never seeing that it was preparation. She no longer wanted to be heard. She wanted to be precise. Her stillness was not surrender, but the foreshadow of reckoning, a storm disguised as clear skies. In his arrogance, he cast her into the role he believed she would never escape. The quiet, discarded wife, too broken to fight back, too dependent to walk away. He had written her part in his story, confident she would never rewrite the script. But while he rehearsed his role as master, she was already authoring the ending. Every smile she gave him was a line of dialogue she no longer believed. Every nod of agreement, a rehearsal for the moment she would step out of the role he had assigned. The house ticked with silence, each second a reminder of the life he thought he controlled. But within that silence, she was making her vow. The next act would not belong to him. It would belong to her. She would no longer be a placeholder, no longer a chain-bound shadow at his side. She would be the storm he never saw coming, the author of an ending written with precision, patience, and justice. The promise was simple, unshakable. When the curtain finally fell, she would stand free, and he would sit in the ruins of his own making. She learned early that silence could be sharper than words. In the stillness she wore like a cloak, her fury simmered invisible to him. He mistook her calm for surrender, never realizing her eyes caught everything. The irregular hours, the carelessly hidden receipts, the smug tilt of his smile when he thought himself clever. She gave nothing away, only watched, letting his arrogance pile stone upon stone, unaware he was building the walls of his own prison. The truth was rarely buried deep. It lay in the open, scattered in the little details he dismissed. Phone records told of late-night calls placed when she was meant to be asleep. Bank slips whispered of dinners and hotel stays he never shared with her. The rhythm of his days changed, a pattern so obvious she almost laughed at the insult of his carelessness. He had built a second life in plain sight, confident she'd never think to look. But she had learned to see what he didn't hide well enough. Her suspicions hardened when she finally saw the younger woman, a reflection of who she used to be before he drained the light from her. Polished, eager to please, and already positioned to replace her. He hadn't even bothered to disguise it well. A message left open, a receipt with 2 glasses of wine, a name that slipped too easily from his tongue. In her chest, the betrayal no longer stung. It calcified into clarity. He had chosen his next placeholder, never imagining the current one was sharpening her revenge. The past returned like shards of broken glass, each memory cutting as it surfaced. Business trips that left her waiting in silence while he returned with the faint scent of another woman's perfume. Smirks that mocked her instincts whenever she questioned him, followed by his scornful dismissal of her suspicions. She remembered the moments she swallowed humiliation because she thought love demanded patience. Those recollections didn't weaken her now, they strengthened her. Each one was a lesson, a reminder that she had been blind once, but would not be blind again. She began her ledger in silence. Every affair, every fraud, every cruel word carefully preserved in her private archive. He thought his sins vanished once committed, but she carried them all, stitching them into a tapestry of betrayal. Infidelity was only the beginning. His dealings in business, too, shady contracts, hidden accounts, lies told not just to her but to those who trusted him. She did not rage. She documented. She turned arrogance into evidence, indifference into ammunition. While he basked in his illusion of control, she made her quiet moves. Behind closed doors, she secured her own accounts, spoke in whispers to the lawyer who would become her ally, and laid the foundation for her escape. Every step she took was invisible to him, but each one fortified her fortress. What he thought of as her dependency was already dissolving. By the time he noticed the shift, it would be far too late to stop it. The trap didn't form overnight. It took patience, a craftsman's hand. She assembled it piece by piece, bank statements tucked safely away, recorded conversations filed neatly, names and dates aligned with precision. What looked to him like the same tired wife across the dinner table was in truth a woman weaving a net so tight he could never wriggle free. Each careless lie he spoke became another knot. And still, he walked blindfolded, arrogance leading him straight to his own undoing. He taunted her openly now, testing her silence with barbed remarks, flaunting his late nights as if daring her to protest. To him, her stillness was proof of weakness, his blindfold sewn from his own overconfidence. He thought himself invincible because she hadn't raised her voice. But silence had always been her weapon, and he had handed her every advantage. She wore her role perfectly, the obedient wife who smiled when required, who nodded at his empty boasts. She knew how to feed his ego, how to encourage his belief that she was no threat. It was her greatest performance, and he was the most gullible audience. Each laugh she offered, each silence she endured, was a layer of disguise concealing the blade of truth she carried. He never suspected that while he rehearsed his next life, she was preparing his final act. Waiting was its own kind of torment, but she endured it with discipline. Every smile stretched across her face was a countdown. Every dinner shared in suffocating silence was another tick of the clock. She let him believe the stage belonged to him, while the suspense coiled inside her like a spring. Patience was the one advantage he had never considered she possessed, but it was the very weapon that would undo him. He mistook her still waters for defeat. He saw no fire in her eyes, no resistance in her posture, and believed he had broken her. But still waters hide depth, strength, currents unseen. Beneath the calm exterior, she had become unshakable, a force he would not recognize until it crashed down upon him. The silence he thought proved his victory was only the silence of someone preparing to strike with devastating precision. And in that silence, she made her vow. He believed quiet meant weakness, but quiet women watch, quiet women remember, quiet women wait, and when the moment came, when every piece of her trap clicked into place, her silence would end. Her voice would return. Not in pleading, not in rage, but in the cold, sharp truth that would tear down everything he had built. The promise she carried in the shadows was simple, final and unbreakable. The reckoning would be hers, and he would never see it coming. A careless receipt slipped from the inside pocket of his jacket, fluttering to the floor unnoticed by anyone but her. The name, the date, the location. Each detail screamed what he thought he had hidden so well. Later, a stray notification on his phone confirmed it again, another trail left behind by his own arrogance. Every step he took, every lie he thought secure, had been etched into plain sight, and she was reading it all with quiet precision. What he believed invisible had become her map, guiding her toward the truth he would never anticipate. He spoke freely in moments he assumed safe, bragging in the shadows, laughing at what he imagined was her ignorance. "She'll never see this coming," he boasted to a friend over drinks, the words dripping with confidence. She was listening, recording, storing every syllable. His laughter rang hollow in her mind now, proof that arrogance blinds, and that the man who believed himself untouchable was, in reality, leading her to the final act of his undoing. Each new discovery clicked into place like a piece of a puzzle long ignored. The affair she had suspected, the funds siphoned with casual precision, the small but deliberate acts of fraud, all converged into a pattern impossible to dismiss. The web of deception he had spun for years now lay before her, complete and undeniable. It was not conjecture, not rumor, not intuition. It was fact, each element recorded, archived, and ready for the moment she would decide to act. With clarity came meticulous planning. She aligned her weapons with care, her lawyer briefed and ready, bank accounts secured, recordings cataloged, allies quietly informed. Nothing was left to chance. Every safeguard was in place, each move calculated to ensure that when the time came, there would be no escape for him. Her patience, her silence, her observation, all culminated in preparation, a strategy as precise as it was relentless. She extended the invitation as if nothing had changed. A gesture of reconciliation wrapped in civility. A dinner, she called it, a chance to mend bridges and restore peace. In truth, it was the stage she had designed with exacting care. The table set, the atmosphere congenial, the pretense flawless, every detail arranged to lure him into his own undoing. He would walk in expecting harmony. Instead, he would find the truth ready to unfold. The guests arrived, unsuspecting witnesses to what she had orchestrated. Family, friends, even his business partner, each unaware that they were about to watch the unraveling of the man they thought they knew. Their presence was deliberate. It ensured accountability, magnified humiliation, and lent weight to the justice she had prepared. She had turned their collective attention into an audience, not of celebration, but of revelation. He entered triumphant, brimming with the smugness that comes from assuming victory. Every smile he offered was confident, every handshake firm with self-assurance. He moved as though the evening were his dominion, blind to the fact that he was stepping onto a stage constructed precisely for his collapse. The walls of his illusion were already closing in, invisible yet inevitable. She played her role to perfection, a portrait of warmth and grace. Each smile, each gesture of care, concealed the meticulous strike she had honed in silence. She served with sweetness, laughed lightly at his jokes, poured wine and offered compliments. All the while her mind rehearsed the sequence that would dismantle him entirely. Beneath the calm exterior, the blade of truth gleamed, ready to cut through years of arrogance and deceit. When he lifted the glass in a toast to his own brilliance, she held her own just as high. A subtle adjustment, a silent calculation, and the moment was aligned. Gravity would do its work. Preparation and patience would transform the toast from a symbol of triumph into a catalyst for collapse. The room held its breath, though none could sense it yet. The shift was imperceptible, but absolute. By the time he savored the imagined victory, the foundation beneath him had already begun to crumble. Each lie he had trusted, each deception he had nurtured, now turned against him with relentless inevitability. The floor, both literal and figurative, gave way, leaving him unmoored, exposed, and powerless. The arrogance that had once shielded him became the very instrument of his undoing, and she remained composed, her vengeance precise, complete, and utterly justified. The ballroom glittered with warmth and laughter, every candle casting shadows that danced across polished floors. He moved among the guests with practiced charm, a toast in hand, basking in the illusion that the night revolved entirely around him. Compliments echoed his ego. Nods reinforced his sense of supremacy, and he smiled, unaware that each step he took carried him closer to the precise moment of his undoing. She began methodically, presenting the first layer of her carefully constructed truth. Bank statements aligned with suspicious withdrawals, photos captured moments he hoped had remained unseen, and messages revealed betrayals he had assumed invisible. Each fact landed with the weight of inevitability, silent daggers piercing the inflated confidence he wore so carelessly. There was no anger in her voice, only the cold clarity of one who had watched, waited, and now revealed the undeniable. The room held its breath. Conversations faltered mid-sentence, forks hovered over plates, and eyes darted between them as shock spread like wildfire. Each guest absorbed the evidence, the weight of revelation magnifying the impact. No one moved, yet the air was electric with awareness. The unspoken recognition that a facade meticulously maintained for years had been dismantled in moments of measured precision. Then came the exposure of the mistress, the secret carefully hidden behind nights and lies. Her presence, once concealed, was now undeniable, revealed through photographs and messages, laid bare before those whose approval he had always sought. The laughter he had expected was replaced by stunned silence. Every glance confirmed the judgment he had ignored, and for the first time, he saw the consequences of his arrogance in the eyes of the very people he believed would shield him. Financial deceit followed in swift succession. Fraudulent accounts, manipulated records, and years of calculated belittling emerged like a meticulously drawn map of his misdeeds. Each revelation stripped away another layer of his control, leaving him scrambling to regain composure, his carefully constructed world teetering on the brink of collapse. Denial surfaced too late, a desperate instinct against an unassailable tide. He opened his mouth, attempted protests, deflections, even excuses, but every word faltered against the damning precision of her evidence. Panic flickered across his face as the room's attention bore down, impartial and unyielding. He realized only then that he had been 3 steps behind from the start. Every boast, every calculated slight, had been anticipated, turned against him in a sequence executed with unerring foresight. She had predicted his arrogance, his belief in his invulnerability, and now she stood perfectly poised to claim the final victory. Through it all, she remained a pillar of composed authority. Every gesture, every glance radiated quiet dominance. He flailed, his words meaningless, while she controlled the rhythm of revelation, guiding the room's attention with subtle precision. Her silence became power, a weapon sharper than any accusation he could muster. Finally, with a calm that belied the intensity of months spent in preparation, she delivered the coup de grace. "You said I was a placeholder. Tonight, you're the one being replaced." The words struck with surgical clarity, each syllable dismantling his ego, leaving him exposed, diminished, and utterly defeated. The aftermath was immediate and absolute. Guests whispered, eyes avoided his, and every social buffer he had relied upon evaporated in the wake of her strategic triumph. She walked away unshaken, her steps steady, her control complete. In the silence left behind, it was clear. The game had ended, and she had reclaimed not just her dignity, but the narrative of her own life. The echo of his arrogance had barely faded when the consequences settled over him like a storm he could neither control nor escape. Public humiliation clung to his every word, and financial ruin stripped him of the power he had wielded with such careless cruelty. Each misstep, every whispered truth revealed, left him exposed in a world he had long assumed would bend to his whims. He had built a throne on deception and pride, and now both crumbled beneath the weight of undeniable reality. The mistress, once a shadowed accomplice in his schemes, vanished as abruptly as she had appeared. He found himself abandoned, the false alliances he had relied upon dissolving before his eyes. Alone, he faced the full consequences of his deceit, his isolation amplifying the sting of betrayal he had inflicted on others for years. In the emptiness, he glimpsed the extent of his own miscalculations. But there was no hand to steady him, no loyalty to soften the blow. Meanwhile, she moved through the aftermath with calm assurance, her allies circling to offer what he had persistently denied: support, recognition, and unwavering solidarity. Friends and family, once spectators to his manipulations, rallied around her, reaffirming her value and reinforcing the truth she had long known, that she was never weak, never dependent, and never silent without cause. In their presence, the wounds inflicted by his arrogance began to close, stitched not with vengeance alone, but with the quiet strength of being understood and supported. With her finances secured and autonomy fully restored, she reclaimed a life unbound by his control. The contracts he had manipulated, the accounts he had hidden, All belonged once more to her domain, a testament to her foresight and determination. Each decision she made reinforced her freedom, a tangible declaration that the chains he had so carefully placed were now broken. Their weight dissolved into irrelevance. Her patience, honed over months of silent observation, proved more powerful than any outburst could have been. Every insult he had delivered, every slight he had imposed, had been catalogued, measured, and translated into action. Her calculated restraint became a weapon sharper than rage, demonstrating that true strength often hides beneath still waters, invisible until the precise moment of strike. In the unfolding of his ruin, poetic justice revealed itself with perfect symmetry. Every misdeed, every arrogance-driven choice he had made, contributed to the trap he could never see. He had laid the path to his own downfall, and she had merely followed it with precision, allowing his own hubris to collapse under the weight of truth. There was no cruelty in her method, only inevitability, the natural consequence of pride untempered by foresight. Revenge, when executed with exacting care, need not be loud to resonate. Her triumph was measured, deliberate, and devastating in its completeness. She had dismantled his influence, restored her dignity, and orchestrated a reckoning that left him powerless without raising her own voice beyond the necessary. The quiet precision of her actions spoke volumes, more piercing than any confrontation could have managed. And in the final moment, she allowed a single truth to echo where it mattered most. He thought I was just a placeholder, but I was his ending. The words carried the weight of strategy, restraint, and inevitability. His empire of control had vanished, leaving him in ruin, while she stepped forward, unbroken, sovereign over her own life, and untouchable in the power she had reclaimed.